Welcome to IDD Talks. My name is Anastasia Larina, and today we have a very special guest. Joining me now from China is Einar Tangen, Senior Fellow at Taihe Institute and the World Chairman of Asian Narratives. Hello and a warm welcome to IDD Talks.
My pleasure being here. Look forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much. So let me start with a very simple question. How do you see the current level of cooperation between China and Azerbaijan?
Well, a lot of the cooperation is part of a Gordian knot, which is the relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia, Russia, China, Turkey. It's very difficult. In terms of where China is directly with Azerbaijan, it wants friend relations. China, unlike other countries, believes that trade is the key to peace, that having countries that are secure in their borders. China has backed Azerbaijan in the integrity of its territory. That there has to be a path for development. Azerbaijan has been way ahead of the pack, funding a lot of its improvements through its own cash flow, and also that there has to be respect for governments. And that is something that China excels at. It understands that Azerbaijan has its own path. It is not asking it to choose. All it asks is that there be an understanding that differences do not mean that you cannot have harmony.
Well, you said about economic cooperation. So tell us about the importance of Middle Corridor for China and the role of Azerbaijan.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's always a plan B. Right now, Russia and China are very much on the same page, but it is good to have alternates in a lot of cases because the global supply chains can be disrupted. You never know what's going to happen in one area, if there's going to be conflict. If that is the case, you have to have alternatives. Land routes now are very, very important to China. On their eastern borders, the United States has five island ring chains of bases, over 400, which is using as in essence a containment facility. So therefore, China has to look elsewhere. China's greatest weakness is resources. It ranks about near the 100 out of 200 in resources per person. Obviously, it's a huge manufacturer. Its manufacturing is greater than the next 9 countries combined. But that means it needs those resources in order to add value and then resell those as part of its economy. So it's very, very sensitive to any kind of disruption. Therefore, Azerbaijan is a very important middle way that gives China, as I said, extra logistics alternatives.
Well, recently, Assistant to the President of Azerbaijan, Hikmet Hajiyev, was on official visit to Beijing. Two sides highlighted the importance of developing new ways of cooperation. Could you please name the most attractive spheres in the economy of Azerbaijan for Chinese investors?
Well, obviously, there is some interest in the oil and gas, although it looks that Azerbaijan will be filling the gap that was created by Russian oil and gas. That is a market that's opened to Europe. They're desperate in need. I believe their need is probably greater than China's. But right now, China is the fourth largest partner for Azerbaijan. They would like to see that increase, but only if it means something useful. You cannot force trade. It has to be something where both sides can do their best. Now, in terms of the future, I think what China offers, which is a little different from other countries, is it wants to start developing technology jointly with other countries. It seems to be a very strong part of what China is talking about when it talks about a world of shared destiny. If you do not have IP and you don't own it, you probably will be at the mercy of those who do. And you do not want this digital information revolution to leave countries behind of a virtual have and have-nots. That has not been a recipe for stability. And I think, as China has shown, it believes that societies do best when they take care of those not at the top, but those who need it, the ones at the bottom.
So, does it mean that China can become one of the most important countries helping Azerbaijan in the post conflict recovery?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, China has machinery, obviously intermediate goods. It is looking to downstream production, especially in areas where it makes more sense from a labor point of view to put that somewhere else. China is climbing the cost value of labor. They're trying to deal with it through automation. China currently puts half of all the robots, industrial robots in the world are installed in China. And this is in an effort to make sure that they are cost competitive. But there are areas where you need so much more human labor, whether it's textiles or certain very, very detailed craft goods and things like this. Those need to go elsewhere and find homes. But it's not just about shedding industries that don't work in China anymore. As I said, it really has to be a situation where all the countries rise together. If you leave people behind, there will be conflict because they will feel that there's no future for them. When there's no future, it's easy to be radicalized, and that is the way that the world has been destabilized.
Well, the 2024 UN Climate Change Conference, COP29, will be held in Baku, in Azerbaijan. Green energy renewables are on the agenda. Where do you think China can cooperate with Azerbaijan in organization of COP29?
Well, organizationally, Azerbaijan has everything well in hand. The question is, how seriously will COP29 be taken? I mean, in the past, there have been empty promises that have been made by the dominant nation, saying that they were going to give $100 billion a year to developing, basically the rest of the world in order to deal with climate change. But that promise has not come through. It was supposed to start in 2020. To date, less than 10% of those monies have been dispersed, and most of them going to sweetheart deals involving the very dominant nations that were supposed to be trying to help the developing nations. China is committed to it, and it's not just talk. China is a leader in green energy, both photovoltaic and also wind power. They also have transmission. These kind of alternate energy sources are very important as we transition perhaps to nuclear fusion or even natural gas, hydrogen, which would be much cleaner. These are all necessary steps that happens. Now, Azerbaijan has its own targets. 2050, I believe, is the target to be neutral. I'm sorry, I stand corrected. It's not 2050. That's another nation. But I know that you have targets for reaching peak carbon emissions, and that you want to see not a reduction in the use of carbons, but a repurposing. Instead of using hydrocarbons and burning them, there's ample evidence to show that hydrocarbons, because of the uniqueness of their structure, can be used as feedstock. And it already is. Everything from perfumes, plastics, you name it, hydrocarbons are part of it.
More about the cooperation between Azerbaijan and China within the international organizations, like, for example, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Azerbaijan attached great significance to cooperation within this organization, and of course interested to further increase its presence and development with the member countries. What's your opinion on that?
Well, in terms of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it is not limited. It wants members. Remember, this is an entity that is not looking to create alliances against others. It's looking to stabilize the internal situations of countries, prevent them from falling disarray, being split up into smaller nations, protecting territorial integrity, as it is in Kazakhstan. So, this is very different from AUKUS and the Quad, which are basically aimed at other entities. It's not a NATO that is looking for another enemy in order to justify its existence. SCO is simply about creating peace. And this is basically the main plank of Chinese approach. They want to have countries that are stable, that they can deal with. They're not going to get involved in telling countries how they should be running them, what type of government they should have. That is up to the people of those countries. If China stands for anything, it's the proposition that every country needs to find its own path to prosperity, that the one nation's policies, culture, etc., should not be dictated in the capital of another nation. I think Azerbaijan agrees with that. Obviously, there's been very close cooperation on territorial integrity, and China has backed Azerbaijan on that.
You rightly said about NATO imperialistic ambitions. How would you describe the foreign policy priorities for China now in a new geopolitical landscape?
Well, China does not want to resort to armed conflict. They're against any kind of kinetic, situation. But, the danger here right now is that you have nations that are circling around this idea that they can create a new front for Russia by playing Armenia and Azerbaijan off against each other. And this is something that China wants to prevent. And the only way to do that is to have organizations like the SCO, where countries reaffirm that their security is not dependent on another. That they have to have firm borders, but those borders cannot include the territory of other countries, nor can it be a situation where it's just left in limbo for years to come. There's a lot of frustrations, and obviously there's a lot of history that goes in around the area of Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey, Russia. It's time to put those aside and put the people first. Prosperity is what people want. They don't want more wars. They just want to have peace and a chance of making a better life for themselves and their children, and not being used as pawns in some sort of cynical geopolitical game of trying to maintain one hegemon. It doesn't make sense to them. People just want to get on with their lives.
Does it mean if there is an attempt of NATO to increase its presence in the region of the South Caucasus or Central Asia by using Armenia, we should expect the reaction from China?
I say, I would, China's way of doing things is not to threaten war, to create defensive alliances, as we saw by World War I. Creating defensive alliances against others who are creating defensive alliances is simply a recipe for lighting a fuse that will result in war. What China wants to see is not armed conflict, but a unity of action. I mean, Azerbaijan is far better off uniting with the rest of Central Asia, being supported by China, other countries, and using that to face down those who are trying to create conflict in the region. It's hopeful that other players in the region will understand this, that they do not want to end up like Ukraine, sitting out there on a limb, having their country torn apart by war, their people killed, and for what? Not their interests. Be for the interests of somebody else who's playing, as I said, a cynical game of trying to bring down Russia and China simply because they feel that they should be the only superpower in the world, referring to the United States. But China's way is not to say you must choose one or the other. It is simply, at this point, it's better to unite Global South, Central Asia, to stand firm against these kinds of incursions, to make sure everyone understands that there will be no winners in any kind of kinetic conflict started by other interests.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining our program today. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Anastasia. A pleasure being with you.